The ever-gloomy Constant had a peculiar way of celebrating. Survival, typically, was the only festivity. But Alara, a woman whose spirit stubbornly clung to whimsy despite the gnawing horrors, had decided something momentous was due. Halloween. And thanks to Wilson's latest, accidental, discovery, a strange, crystalline plant resembling a sugar beet, followed by Wickerbottom's diligent research into its chemical properties, a new, delicious path had opened in the crock pot. Sugar. And with sugar, came candy. Lots of it. Their base, nestled on the cusp of an expansive savanna and a dense forest, was already a fortress born of countless seasons. Stone walls gleamed, drying racks sagged with jerky, and advanced machinery hummed with purpose. But now, it was transforming. The usual scent of roasting meat and damp earth was slowly being eclipsed by something else, an overpowering, tantalizing aroma of burnt caramel, melting chocolate, or at least, a close constant equivalent derived from roasted licorice roots and fruit-infused steam. Another batch of gummy spiders is almost ready, Alara. Willow's voice, usually laced with a mischievous crackle, was now infused with pure, unadulterated sugar-fueled glee. She hovered over a boiling crock pot, a long, wooden spoon stirring a thick, iridescent green concoction. Her flame-resistant gloves were covered in sticky residue, and her eyes, normally focused on potential arson, sparkled with confectionery anticipation. Alara grinned, her hands buried deep in a mixing bowl filled with what looked suspiciously like powdered grumblebee wings, destined to become fizzy sherbet. Excellent, Willow. Wolfgang, you have those honeycomb hound's teeth cooling yet. Wolfgang, whose massive arms were usually reserved for felling trees or pulverizing nightmare creatures, was meticulously arranging rows of hardened, golden-brown discs onto a vast cooling rack. Too much heat. Must be firm, yeah. Not like soggy cabbage, he huffed, wiping his brow. Even the mighty Wolfgang had learned the delicate art of candy making, though his patience was often tested by slow cooling times. The strength boost from a proper sugar rush, however, made it all worthwhile. Wilson, perpetually bespectacled and usually immersed in some arcane scientific diagram, was now meticulously measuring powdered spider silk and purified monster meat into a separate pot. The tensile strength of this taffy, Alara, is truly remarkable. I believe, with the right application of heat and stretching, we could achieve a ductility heretofore unseen in confectionery. Meaning it'll be extra chewy, Wilson, Wickerbottom interjected dryly from her perch atop a stack of ingredient crates, a thick tome open on her lap. And capable of dislodging even the most stubborn molars. Don't forget the precise cooling gradient, or you'll merely have a sticky puddle. The elderly librarian, a walking encyclopedia, had become the project's chief R&D, her vast knowledge now applied to the complex chemistry of sugar crystallization and flavor profiles. WEX 78, surprisingly, was the most efficient processing unit. FLESHLINGS, obsession with sugar is illogical. However, sugar-based energy recharge is highly efficient. I recommend increased production of honeycombs. My internal processors indicate optimal caloric intake per unit. The robot, usually dismissive of organic pleasures, had developed an unexpected affinity for rock candy, which, when crushed, provided a delightful crunch and a powerful, if temporary, system overclock. The goal was simple, yet monumental, a mountain of candy. Not just a pile, but a structure. A sugary, edible monument to their defiance against the Constant's grim reality. Halloween, Alara reasoned, was the perfect excuse. Their base had expanded into a sprawling metropolis of sweet production. Fields of saccharine roots and berry bushes had been carefully cultivated, their growth accelerated by Wickerbottom's horticultural expertise. Honey farms teemed with grumble bees, their golden yield funneled directly into boiling cauldrons. Spider dens, usually a source of dread, were now carefully managed for silk and monster meat, both surprisingly versatile ingredients when rendered harmless and mixed with enough sugar. Even the ice blocks from deep winter were now less about keeping food fresh and more about chilling sheets of hardening caramel and intricate molded lollipops. Multiple crock pots simmered and bubbled, spaced out around a newly constructed, massive stone storage hall. The air was thick with the scent of 1,000 confectionery dreams. There were towering stacks of beetle nut brittle, made from roasted beetle shells and honey glowing, glowberry gels, infused with bioluminescent mushroom caps, and tentacle taffy, surprisingly chewy and flavored with tangy berries. Willow's specialty was the scorched sugar skulls, hardened sugar molded into gruesome shapes, then fire branded for a smoky flavor. Wolfgang, despite his clumsy nature, had a knack for pulling the longest, most satisfyingly stretchy, monster meat marzipan, dyed various grotesque colors. They ate constantly. Hunger, a permanent specter in the Constant, was now a distant memory, replaced by the delightful sting of a sugar rush. Alara would grab a handful of nightmare fuel nibs, dark chocolate with a spicy kick, and feel her energy surge. Wolfgang, after a particularly strenuous session of hauling sugar cane, would devour an entire plate of Glommer's Goo gummies, roaring with renewed vigor. Even the picky WX-78 would occasionally allow a sugar shard, to drop into its internal workings, the resulting whirring and enhanced processing speed a testament to its effectiveness. The sheer joy of it all was intoxicating. They laughed, sticky-fingered and sugar-dusted, their usual worries momentarily forgotten. The Constant was still out there, full of terrors, but inside their sugary stronghold, they were kings of confectionery. Until, of course, the Constant decided to remind them of its nature. It started with the distant howl of hounds, a sound that usually sent them scrambling for spears and armor. But this time, Alara exchanged a mischievous glance with Willow. "Time for some sweet justice?" Alara asked, a grin spreading across her face. Willow cackled, already reaching for a bucket of shiny, obsidian-like candies. "My, scorched sugar skulls are just begging to meet some canine teeth." The idea of candy as a weapon had been a happy accident. Wilson, in a moment of frustration, had hurled a particularly stubborn, rock-hard, honeycomb crunch at an encroaching spider, only for it to shatter the arachnid's leg with surprising force. Later, a sticky batch of caramel cobblestones had proved remarkably effective at slowing down a charge of beefalo. Now, it was a legitimate combat strategy. As the first wave of hounds burst through the tree line, their red eyes gleaming, the defenders of the sugary fortress were ready. "Incoming," Wolfgang boomed, not with fear, but with anticipation. He hefted two massive, disc-shaped, giant jawbreakers, each the size of a dinner plate, and hurled them with all his might. The first jawbreaker whizzed through the air, striking a lead hound square in the muzzle with a sickening crunch, sending it yelping and tumbling. The second ricocheted off a tree, then bounced perfectly to collide with another hound's flank, slowing it instantly. "My, gummy gloomberries are ideal for entanglement," Wilson shouted, having fashioned a makeshift slingshot. He launched a volley of oversized, sticky, dark purple gummies. They splattered onto the charging hounds, adhering to their fur and legs, tangling them in a slow, struggling mess. Willow, a tray of her scorched sugar skulls at her feet, was a blur of motion. She dipped a fireproof net into a vat of molten caramel, then swung it, slinging sticky, fiery globs at the creatures. The caramel solidified on impact, hardening and burning slightly, creating a sizzling, sweet-smelling impediment. Alara had discovered the tactical versatility of the exploding peppermint puffs. Little white and red striped spheres, infused with a volatile concoction derived from explosive puffballs and pure sugar, that would detonate with a satisfying pop and a cloud of minty shrapnel. She lobbed them with practiced ease, creating small, localized blasts that stunned and disoriented the creatures. Wex 78, oddly enough, had fashioned a rock candy railgun, a modified dart launcher that fired razor-sharp shards of solidified sugar crystals. Optimal projectile velocity achieved, target acquired, a thwip sound, and a hound collapsed, a shimmering shard embedded in its hide. Wickerbottom, meanwhile, was not directly fighting, but rather shouting strategic advice. "Aim for the joints, Wolfgang. The hardened caramel is most effective there. And, Alara, a broader dispersal of your peppermint puffs would create a wider area of effect." The battlefield became a bizarre ballet of destruction and sweetness. Hounds snarled, stuck to ground by hardened taffy. Spiders scurried, only to be pelted by licorice lashers that wrapped around their legs, or have their chitinous exoskeletons cracked by sugar shard projectiles. It was chaotic, absurd, and undeniably fun. They weren't just surviving, they were playing. As the last hound whimpered and retreated, coated in various sticky, sweet, and slightly singed confectionery, the group stood amidst their sugary arsenal, panting with exertion and exhilaration. There wasn't a speck of nightmare fuel on their faces, only sticky residue and wide, triumphant grins. That, Wolfgang declared, popping a honeycomb hound's tooth into his mouth, was much better than poking with spear. The days leading up to Halloween were a blur of production, feasting, and the occasional, satisfyingly sweet skirmish. Finally, the day arrived. Their base, already a testament to industriousness, was now transformed into a wonderland. Lanterns crafted from carved pumpkin gourds, a rare find in the Constant, glowed softly. Vines draped with iridescent gummy gloomberries hung like festive streamers. And in the center of it all, a truly monumental achievement, the Candy Mountain. It wasn't a neat pile. It was an organic, glorious, multicolored edifice. A base of massive, caramel cobblestones, rose into walls of beetle nut brittle. Turrets of scorched sugar skulls stood sentinel. Cascades of tentacle taffy draped down its sides, shimmering under the pale Constant moon. Rivers of glow berry gel snaked through valleys of monster meat marzipan. The sheer scale was breathtaking, a testament to their collective effort and boundless sugar-fueled energy. Alara stood back, admiring their creation, a warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with sugar. It was the warmth of camaraderie, of finding joy even in the most desolate of places. Wilson was carefully placing a glowing, fizzy sherbet fountain atop the highest peak, its tiny bubbles adding a celebratory fizz to the air. Wolfgang was already chipping off a piece of jawbreaker, the size of his head, eyes shining. Willow was admiring her handiwork, a satisfied hum escaping her lips. Wickerbottom, after a moment of scholarly observation, even allowed herself a small, knowing smile, taking a refined sip of what looked suspiciously like a liquefied, dark chocolate spider treat. They didn't have costumes, not really. Their usual clothes, patched and worn, were now just coated in various sticky, shimmering candy residues. No trick-or-treating, just feasting. They gathered around the candy mountain, chipping away at its glorious facade, tasting their triumphs, their laughter echoing under the strange, indifferent stars of the constant. The constant remained a harsh, unforgiving realm. Tomorrow, the hounds would return, the starvation would beckon, and the whispers of madness would persist. But tonight, under the glow of their candy mountain, fueled by endless sweetness and unbreakable spirits, Alara and her group had proven that even in the darkest of worlds, one could still find a reason, and a way, to celebrate. And sometimes, the best defense against despair was a mountain of candy, and a good, sweet, sticky fight.